Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think we'll give it a couple more minutes. Looks like we still have people joining, then we'll get started. All right, I think we'll get started and we'll still have a few people joining. Welcome y'all. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to get together for the balance of the state meeting today. We have a pretty full agenda, so I think we'll get started with just some quick introductions. We'll go through the LHCCs first, and then if there's other members that would like to introduce themselves, we can do that afterwards. So let's start with Washington County.
Hi, this is Charlene Quell. I am the LHCDC director for the Washington LHCC. Thanks for starting at the bottom, Travis.
Yeah, welcome. All right, how about anyone from Grand County?
Hi, this is Liz Donkerslew. I'm the Housing Resource Coordinator at the Moab Valley Multicultural Center.
Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
All right, Tooele County. No one yet? All right, how about Iron County?
Peggy Green, Iron County LHC.
Welcome, Peggy. Washington County, or no, sorry, I already did Washington County. Weber Morgan.
It looks like me, Kara, YCC.
Anyone else from Weber Morgan? Seen Andy on there earlier. How about San Juan County? Uinta Basin. Steve, I see you. How about Davis?
Here and running for the day.
Hey, glad to have you, Steve. Thanks. Okay, how about Carbon Emery? Bear River?
Hi, I'm on. Sorry, Stephanie Jones.
Welcome, Stephanie. 6 County. Anyone from Uinta Basin? All right. And there was a few other members I seen on. If you would like to introduce yourselves, I seen Pete and a few others. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pete Caldwell with the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health.
Welcome. All right. You see a few other people joining. Welcome, glad you could join us today. And it's like Russell just jumped on a phone call real quick. We have Vard joining us today to present. I appreciate you joining our meeting today.
Sure, no problem.
And I'm going to turn the time over to Russell to continue with our agenda. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Travis. Sorry, taking some phone calls. Looks like there was some confusion with a couple of the links, but we should be good to go now. So thank you, Anna, Deanne, anybody else that joined us. Feel free to introduce yourselves if you'd like to.
Hi, I'm Deanne with Twilla County Housing.
Welcome, Deanne.
I'm Anna Davidson, Ogden City Police Department Homeless Services Advocate.
Welcome, Anna.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We will be taking probably about half this meeting and turning it over to Vard to talk about fair housing and housing discrimination. This is a required training that we have to do as a COC every year, and lucky to have this recorded that we can use it in the future. And thank you, Vard, for your time and effort to talk with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Are you ready for me to?
We're ready.
Oh, okay, let me.
I don't know if you want me to give you an introduction. I had the pleasure of working with Vard back at the Road Home and years ago. Excellent resource for our community, and I think this is a really good training, even if it wasn't required by HUD. So.
Yeah, whatever gets us here, right? Okay, so can everybody see fair housing as a slide? Okay, great.
We can see it.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks for having me today. I will also just quickly mention an intern who's working with me, Derek. He's has his camera off, but he's observing today, so he's here from the DLC as well. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I was just thinking that I could probably have a conversation with like each and every one of you about fair housing and kind of exactly like what you might be seeing or what your issues might be related to it. So I'm just going to kind of start though with like the general fair housing training, and I'll try to emphasize some areas that might have an impact on like homeless services, housing related to moving people into housing, things like that. But if you have questions about specific situations, would really be curious to hear what those are, and then, like I said, what you might be seeing in your different areas. And so I will start off by saying, though, I'm not an attorney, so keep that in mind, that what I'm going to be talking about today, you should just kind of consider general information about the Fair Housing Act and not legal advice. And so we do have attorneys on staff at the DLC, and we can provide a certain level of technical assistance to providers and entities. So if you have questions about specific situations, you can let me know, let us know, and we can maybe try to provide technical assistance. I think sometimes there can be, we might get to a point with technical assistance, though, where we might need to say you need to talk to your own attorney. And the reason being is we really want to try to provide technical assistance on the one hand, but on the other hand, we advocate for clients, and so potentially we at some point in the future, some context could be knocking on your door with an issue that we have with you or your entity. So just kind of keep that in mind, but we can try to provide as much as we can. So a little bit about the DLC. We're what's called a protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. And there's a federal mandate that says there needs to be an agency like ours in every state. We're basically a civil rights organization for disabilities here in Utah. These are the different teams that we have. So we work with people who have disabilities in a number of areas. However, we also have a fair housing program, and our fair housing program is funded by HUD. And so our fair housing program is a little bit unique within our agency because we serve all protected classes in our fair housing program, not just disability. And address all forms of housing discrimination, not just disability. And so the Fair Housing Program at the DLC, we basically do three things. So we enforce the Fair Housing Act and other fair housing laws. So if somebody feels like they've experienced discrimination in housing, they can call us and we can have a conversation with them about what's going on, and what that might look like. Could be, we give them some information to try to resolve the situation on their own, using some self-advocacy, and be asking for accommodations that they might need, things like that. Or we might step in and try to mediate a situation with a landlord. So again, using accommodation as an example, maybe there's a landlord or some sort of housing provider who has denied the person an accommodation. And so we might step in and mediate. But then we also file administrative complaints with HUD or UALD, depending on the situation, alleging discrimination against landlords. And sometimes in some situations, if it's either bad enough, or if it's some sort of design and construction issue, we might just file that in court. So that's kind of what our enforcement looks like. And then we do fair housing testing, which some of you have maybe heard about, which is like secret shopper, except with apartments and discrimination. And so I have a pool of people that I use for that. And we're just doing phone testing right now, but every week I have my testers call on apartments, and I monitor those interactions with landlords for signs of discrimination. And so we do phone testing throughout the state. And if any of you are working on any AIs or other sorts of reports, and you're interested in some data or information about testing we may have done in your area, you can let me know and I can maybe try to put something together for you. And then education and outreach. I think it's just super important for people to understand the Fair Housing Act, you all as providers or administrators, but then also consumers. And so again, like in your areas, if you know people or entities who would like a fair housing training, we're also happy to do that. So that's the Fair Housing Program. So the Fair Housing Act, I'm sure most of you have had a fair housing training before, and some of you have probably had them from me and have heard me say this a number of times. But so the Fair Housing Act is the primary law or piece of legislation that drives what we do. It affects a lot of us in different ways. I think the history of the Fair Housing Act is really important or interesting. It was enacted in 1968. It was the last piece of major civil rights legislation in the 1960s. So the full name is the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which we call it the Fair Housing Act. And it was created to give people in housing situations equal opportunity. And in the Fair Housing Act, it identifies what we call protected classes, which it's something really important for us to kind of understand. The term protected class gets to kind of who's protected by the Fair Housing Act. And a protected class is a group of people with shared traits or characteristics that can't be targeted for harassment or discrimination, or also be subject to discrimination, whether it's conscious or not. And so the Fair Housing Act spells out 7 federally recognized protected classes. So these are going to be protections everywhere in the country. So we have race, color, national origin, and with national origin, quite often, if somebody has an accent, that's going to be falling under national origin, and that relates to where somebody might be from or where their family is from, their ancestry. Religion is a protection. Sex is a protection, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And when the Fair Housing Act was written, that mostly just meant male/female. It's a little bit different today. Family status is a protection. So with family status, that means there is a child under the age of 18 in the household. So that can be 2 parents with kids, single parents with kids, expecting, a mother or a family expecting a child, maybe a family looking to foster children into the household, looking to adopt children into the household, maybe grandparents who are now getting custody of their grandchildren would now also maybe be covered by family status. But the essence of it there is there's a child in some form under the age of 18 in the household. And then disability is the 7th federal protected class. So like I said, those are protections everywhere. The states can't fall below those 7, but we can add more. And so we have a Utah Fair Housing Act that covers the state of Utah that includes 3 additional protected classes, which is really great. And the first of the 3 additional protected classes here in Utah is source of income. And this is one that's going to be really important for people that you might be working with or in the realm of homelessness. So with source of income really relates to where somebody's money is coming from. It's going to help them pay for their housing. And for the most part, that's going to mean some sort of government assistance, okay? And so examples of that might be, maybe you have a household where there are 2 or 3 people receiving Social Security, and that's their primary income, like cash-wise. And sometimes there can be a perception with landlords of, I want someone who has a job in here. I want someone who's working. But those two or 3 people in the household who are receiving benefits, like if they can afford the rent, like they should still also have that same opportunity and not be turned down just because they're receiving Social Security and not working. And then another example, which is very important, is housing vouchers. So here in Utah, landlords are supposed to take housing vouchers. And I'll talk in a minute about like what properties are supposed are covered by the Fair Housing Act, but for the most part here in Utah, a landlord shouldn't say like blanket statement, we don't take housing. Because the Utah Fair Housing Act says that landlords have to take housing through source of income. And then also here in Utah, we have sexual orientation as a protection and gender identity as a protection. And so those are in the Utah Fair Housing Act, but I want to go back to the protected class of sex on the federal level. So kind of at this point in time, sexual orientation and gender identity are for the most part covered as a federal protection for a few different reasons. So there, a Supreme Court case, as well as some executive orders. So definitely, like if you're receiving federal funding, sexual orientation, gender identity are protected. So keep that in mind. So that's who's protected. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the protected classes? Okay. So the next question that I think is important to understand is like what housing is covered by the Fair Housing Act. And my baseline for what's covered by the Fair Housing Act is most housing, okay? So I'm gonna try to say that like 20 times when I'm on this slide. Okay, most housing is covered. So from duplexes on up to apartment complexes with hundreds of units, those are all covered by the Fair Housing Act. There are some exemptions to who's covered, but then there are also some exceptions to the exemptions. So it might seem kind of complicated for people sometimes. That's why I just like to say most housing is covered. And if you ever have any questions, let me know and I can maybe help walk through that situation. But most housing is covered. So the exemptions, so that the housing that wouldn't be covered would be, number one, situations where there's a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, and the owner lives in one of those units, okay? So that's 4 units or less, that's owner occupied. So the owner has to be living on the premises. So let's say I have a duplex and I live in half of it. I am not covered by the Fair Housing Act, okay? Because I am the owner, I live in half, and I rent out the other half. So that's owner occupied, it's not covered. However, let's say I own 10 duplexes, okay? That changes the situation a little bit. So I might be living in half of one of those 10, but I'm renting out, 19 other units. I'm obviously in the business of renting, so I'm going to be covered again. And usually in those situations, it's not actually me who owns those properties, it's an LLC, which if it's a business who owns the property, it's going to be covered. So if somebody ever encounters like a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, and like the owner says, oh, we're not covered by the Fair Housing Act, that's maybe not true. It would only not be covered if the owner lives there as well. So the other exemption would be single family homes, okay? So if I own one house and, let's say I own a house and I'm getting married and I'm moving into my spouse's place because they also have a house, and I'm gonna rent mine out on the side, okay? So I own one house, I'm renting it out on my own. It's not covered by the Fair Housing Act. But if I change that situation just a little bit, and I have that house, but let's say I get a job out of the country, and I'm going to be, living in Costa Rica for a couple of years, and I hire a property management company to rent my house out for me, my house is going to be covered again because property management companies are in the business of renting. So anything that's going to be rented by a property management company is going to be covered by the Fair Housing Act. So hopefully you can see there are actually very few situations that aren't covered by the Fair Housing Act. And then I also want to cover, because this is also pertinent for you all, emergency shelters are also covered by the Fair Housing Act. So places like domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters. Okay, so places where people are going to be residing for a while, those are going to be covered. To treatment facilities. And so again, you know, like with us being here today, some of you might be providing some sort of housing service. So that would mean you might have to comply with the Fair Housing Act that way. Like Russell probably when he worked like at the road home, right? So like they're a shelter, they have to comply, but then also they're trying to move people into housing. So it's good for them to know so they can advocate with landlords. So you might have, this stuff might affect you in a couple different ways. So does anybody have questions about what type of housing is covered by the Fair Housing Act? Okay, I see some head shaking. I'll take silence as meaning everyone has it. So I want to spend a couple of minutes going through what we call discriminatory conduct. So this is kind of discrimination on like an individual level, like a micro level. We also call it disparate treatment. So I'm treating somebody differently. A landlord is treating somebody differently because they belong to one of those protected classes. When we're doing testing, like we're looking for signs of these things. If something like this happens in a test, that's going to be a red flag for us that there might be discrimination happening. So the first one of these is refusing to rent or sell to someone. And it can be an overt statement. Like we don't take housing, like that's overt, right? It could also be something like we don't want refugees living here. We don't want Native Americans living here. We don't want people with certain types of disabilities living here, right? So that's like very out in the open. Most time discrimination is not that obvious. And so the rest of these things we keep an eye out for are going to be more subtle ways that the owners or landlords might discriminate. So the next one is refusing to negotiate for housing. And I look at this one as someone doesn't have a chance to get their foot in the door to have a conversation about housing. And a couple of examples might be somebody who has an accent, like they call on an apartment and the owner hears that they have an accent and the owner hangs up on them because of their accent. And we've had this happen to our testers here. Or the person with the accent calls and leaves a message and the owner hears on the voicemail that that person has an accent and they don't want to rent to them, so they just don't call them back. So those are ways of telling people no, you can't live here by not ever even having a conversation with them. Another example might be situations where it's kind of like word of mouth, quote unquote advertising, right? So like you need to know someone who knows the owner who can kind of connect you. And with all those levels of needing to know the right person, people are screened out and not given opportunity. A concrete example of this might be maybe there's an owner and they have an 8-plex and they have a couple openings and they go to church on Sunday. And at church on Sunday, they tell people word of mouth, I have a couple of openings. If you know anyone, send them my way. So like a problem with that situation is like you kind of would have to belong to that religious denomination to have that opportunity to apply for those apartments. And if you don't, then you're not going to have that opportunity. So that's another example of that. The next one is making housing unavailable. And this is where someone is lied to about availability. So maybe that person with the accent calls and they're told, oh, sorry, it's already gone. Good luck. But then I call and I don't have an accent and it's available for me, okay? Or someone with a housing voucher. Hey, I have a housing voucher. Do you guys have any openings? Nope, sorry, we're all full. Which is okay if that's true, but if they were just telling that person that they didn't have any units, then that's a problem. The next one is denying a dwelling. So this is where someone is denied somewhere along the application process because they belong to one of those protected classes, or someone in their household belongs to one of those protected classes. An example of this might be an interracial couple. And so maybe the white partner goes out and she has a great conversation with the owner and everything is good. You know, she gets a tour, she gets an application and is encouraged to apply. But then the next day she comes back with her husband who's Black. Now the owner sees her husband's Black and doesn't want to rent to them. So they deny their application, you know, or just put it in the bottom of the pile or find some reason to screen them out. I think that this also can be common with families with children. So again, sometimes parents might have to take their kids with them when they're looking for a place to live. And so an owner might be thinking, I don't want these kids living here. And I think also, especially with children who might have disabilities. And so maybe there's like a behavioral manifestation related to disability. And the owner's like, I definitely don't want these people living here. So they let them apply and then they just deny the application. So those are examples of denying a dwelling. Falsely denying that housing is available for inspection. You know, if there's an apartment that's open and like everyone, it's pretty normal to want to look at a place before you apply, right, and move in, and someone's not given that opportunity. So again, someone with an accent is probably told something like, you know, well, I can't show it to you because we're remodeling it. Here's an application. But somebody else might be told, oh yeah, I can give you a tour. Let me show you around. And we also have 3 other units open. Let me show you those too. Here's an application. We would love to have you. Deny access to something. So if there's something at a property for people to like use, everyone should have access to that. You know, example might be maybe there's like a common area or a grassy area for people to hang out at. And, you know, what if a family is told, we don't want your kids here. We don't want your kids playing here. That could indicate discrimination based on family status because everyone else can freely hang out there. But that family was just told that because they have children. The next one is setting different terms and conditions and things like that. Money can really come into play here. You know, if there's an apartment that's advertised for $1,000, it should be $1,000 for everyone. You know, not $1,000 for me because I'm white and I'm going to pay, you know, from my paycheck, and $1,500 for someone who's not white. Okay, it should be the same amount. You know, when I used to work at the road home, and I still hear this happen quite a bit, you know, oftentimes when somebody discloses they have a housing voucher, maybe like one of the first things the owner says to that person is, well, how much will your voucher pay? And you know, if the rent was advertised for $1,000, but their voucher will pay up to $1,300, that owner then might be, they might charge that person $1,300, like that upper limit of the voucher. But they shouldn't be doing that. They should still be charging the same amount that they would for everybody else. Same thing goes for like deposits and things like that. So that's 7 different terms. And then the last one of these is called steering. And this is providing different housing opportunities. So this might look one of 3 ways. So this could happen like across a neighborhood or across an area. Like maybe somebody wants to apply for an apartment on one side of town. So maybe like here in Salt Lake, on the east side where there's, you know, more white people. And they're told something like, well, you know, I don't know if you'll like it here. Let's have you apply for this other one over here in West Valley or somewhere else. Okay, so they're steered to another area. You can see this within an apartment complex. So maybe the property is thinking, we're going to put all the white tenants here. We're going to put all the refugees in this building. We're going to put everyone with the disability in this building. We're going to put everyone with the housing voucher in this building. So separating people out into different buildings at a property. And it can also happen within a building. You know, families with kids are often steered to basement apartments. We have a lot of people with disabilities are, you know, maybe they're interested in a third floor unit, but the owner says, well, how would you like this ground floor unit instead? So those are examples of steering. And I think the thing with steering is, you know, if different groups of people want to live in the same neighborhood or in the same building or on a certain level, that's fine. The problem is when their choice is taken away and they don't really have a choice. They don't have a choice between neighborhoods. Like they have to take, it's a choice of one over here. So that's steering. And I see that there are a few questions in the chat. So I'm going to read those and maybe try to answer those. So Travis said, can you speak to screening like credit or higher deposits due to lack of credit? Yeah, so so that one might relate to the setting different terms one. So as long as there's a legitimate business reason for having a policy, it's generally okay. And so with credit, you know, there's a legitimate business reason for running credit on people, right? So the idea of wanting to make sure someone's going to be able to pay the rent, things like that. Same thing maybe goes for background checks. You know, like, you know, we want to have a safe community. We want to have a safe complex. So we run background checks on people. So there's like reasons for that. So it kind of heads into a gray area sometimes with fair housing though. You know, with people who fall into those protected classes, like problems with background checks and credit checks, and I'm sure you see this with folks that you might work with, is yeah, like lack of credit or poor credit. You know, people who fall into protected classes might be more likely to have poor credit. So those sorts of policies might affect them more. But like I said, if there's a legitimate business reason, then it's okay. Okay, so it sounds like I clarified that. ESG allows for double deposits, and ESG CV, I'm not sure what CV stands for, even allows for triple deposits and other landlord incentives. What is the best way to approach landlord incentives without creating a fair housing issue? Okay, CARES and COVID. Yeah, so this is another kind of interesting concept. Like you all as providers are going to have to balance this, and I'm going to preface this by saying like this is this might relate to like a good reason why the DLC is here, and maybe a good opportunity for you to call us. So you might be in a situation where, you know, your goal is to house your person, right? Like you need to get someone into housing, and just like with that comment, there are incentives out there. It sounds like it's like writ right into the grants that, you know, like the people that we're trying to find housing for might be harder to house, and so like what can we do to get landlords to accept them, right? And it's just kind of the nature of that. But yeah, it could really potentially be a fair housing issue, because again, going back to that setting different terms or fees, you know, a landlord shouldn't charge someone a higher deposit just because they have a voucher, only for that reason. You know, it's like, is a source of income is a protected class like race. An owner shouldn't charge someone who's not white double the deposit, right? So same thing goes for source of income. So so maybe like the line, I don't know, maybe this is something we can have more of a conversation about. Like in theory, everyone should be paying the same amount. If an owner is saying, I will only take your person if you give me 3 times the deposit, that's going to raise red flags for me, okay? But again, I know that you need to house your person. And so you might not be able to house your person if you say, you can't charge us 3 times the deposit. You know, like you need to get that person into a place. So kind of like an option in these situations is, yeah, like move your person into housing, and then let us know. And we can do an investigation on the side without them knowing you're even involved. You know, like I can have my testers call and pretend like they have vouchers. And, you know, if we hear an owner saying, yeah, you can stay here, but you have to pay 3 times the deposit, we might file a complaint on that. So in the short term, I think you all need to do what you got to do to get your people into housing, but like long run, like leveling the playing field for people. If we know that those things are happening, we can test and through complaints force compliance. Was that like a concrete / vague enough answer to that question?
So Bard, I was just gonna comment. We do the same thing for our shelter plus care and our supportive housing programs, but we offer, so we say, would you be willing to accept this individual that is high barrier, that has poor criminal history, no or little credit? If we pay first and last month's rent and a deposit, would you be willing to rent to this person? Is that the same thing, or is that a different, by us offering versus them telling us?
Yeah, I think that's a big difference. You know, like again, you know, we're in a capitalist society, and I'm also just kind of thinking like, how would that situation play out like with another protected class? You know, if there was someone who was Black and a landlord was saying you can only live here if you pay twice the deposit, like that's obviously a problem. But like if there's a really popular apartment and there's a lot of people applying for it, and somebody says, well, what if I pay you double deposit? Like that money is going to be incentive to have them be selected maybe over the other applicants, whether that's fair or not. So yeah, like it totally makes sense. But I think this is one I'm gonna have a conversation with our attorneys about. So one of the things that we're actually working on right now is a fact sheet related to source of income. There's not like a real good like piece of paper that you can or housing authorities or case managers can like hand to landlords about source of income. And so we have a draft of one of those right now, and I'm making notes. I'm making note about that concept of deposits to maybe add a line item on there after we talk to our attorneys. So like hopefully this fact sheet, yeah, it's going to say like, well, this is source of income. You know, these are the obligations for landlords, and you know, you shouldn't be charging more. And I may be hoping, I think there can be confusion about, you know, what type of housing is covered, like I said, and I think there can be confusion sometimes about, well, you know, I have this voucher now, does my income qualify? So like how to take that voucher amount into consideration when you're considering someone, like adding that to their whole household income, things like that. It's really confusing. And when I'm setting up a source of income test, I have to go line. It's confusing for me, and it's probably confusing to some of you sometimes too, with all of the math and like, you know, your income has to be below this, and this is how much you qualify for this sort of apartment. It's just one giant story problem, and people don't like story problems. But I think kind of like the real thing that happens is someone will just hear, we don't take housing, to just avoid the whole conversation. And so, yeah, we've thought a lot about this, and yeah, we've heard a lot of stuff from you all. So yes. Oh, and there's a whole bunch more in the chat. Okay, so typically landlords aren't requesting the additional, you're offering it. Yeah, like I think that's probably more okay. Yeah, okay, cool. So I think I've caught up on questions. There might have been somebody who had for their virtual hand up, but it looks like it's not up anymore. So, so that's the discriminatory conduct. A few more things. So I want to talk about the protected class of sex. So harassment in housing is prohibited. And this actually applies to all protected classes. So somebody shouldn't be harassed in housing because of their race or family status as well. But I want to talk specifically about sex and sexual harassment. I think that this is very prevalent. I think it's very underreported. And so if you all hear of any of these things happening, we would really like to hear about it. So there are two types of sexual harassment in housing. And I think most people are familiar with what these are because, you know, if you have a job and, you know, most of us have had to take sexual harassment training at work, but it's the same concepts. Okay, so one type is creating a hostile environment. So like creating a hostile work environment, but creating a hostile housing environment. And so those would be situations where, you know, someone is subjected to like unwelcome and unwanted sexual advances. Okay, so like a female tenant and the landlord is always hitting on her. Intimidation or abusive environment, things like that. And then quid pro quo, that the this for that. And that would be something like, if you send me nude photos of yourself, I will knock $100 off your rent. Or if you sleep with me, I'll let you live here for free, okay? Or there's a threat. If you don't sleep with me, if you don't send pictures of yourself to me, I'll evict you or make you lose your housing, okay? And so Steve just commented, yeah, so Davis is underway with his AI. I've actually been talking with Heather, Steve, and who I think is working on your AI for you. And so I've been supplying her information for that. And we're meeting again on Friday. So, so yeah, so there's the sexual harassment. And I think, you know, something to keep in mind with this, people who are most likely to experience sexual harassment would be females, okay? And then also people who identify as part of the LGBTQI plus population, okay, or community, okay? People who are gay, people who are transgender, they're harassed because of that quite a bit. Disability. So I'll probably spend most of the rest of the time talking about disability. So the fair housing gives people who belong to this protected class some additional rights and protections if it's going to help them to be able to use and enjoy their units. And that could be something different for everyone. But the definition of disability in the Fair Housing Act is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So seeing, hearing, walking, breathing, learning, speaking, taking care of oneself, or performing tasks. Is regarded as having an impairment. So maybe I'm looking for a place to live and I don't have a disability, but the landlord makes an assumption about me and assumes I have a disability. That's also not okay if they then treat me differently. And then the third one up here has a record of having such an impairment. And this is another one that might come up or relate to some of the people that you work with. So having a record of some sort of impairment means that like someone has a disability and there's some sort of documentation related to that. Maybe something related to the disability in the past that's now getting in the way of them in the present finding a place to live. So examples, somebody might have bipolar disorder. And so maybe in the past, they weren't seeking treatment. Maybe they had some manic episodes. Maybe they, during those episodes, they had encounters with law enforcement. And so now they have stuff on their background check where, you know, they had manic episodes related to a disability in the past, but today, like they're doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. They're good, and so, but a landlord might look at their record and say, well, you had these things going on, I'm not going to rent to you. So that might be an example. This also would include people with a history or a past of substance abuse, alcohol abuse or substance use and abuse, okay? And so again, in the past, maybe somebody, yeah, they used to use, they used to have a problem with alcohol, but today they're clean. Today they're sober, and they made changes in their life to move away from that other lifestyle, and now they're trying to, you know, find a place to live. But there might be things on their record from their past that are getting in the way of them finding a place to live today. And we've had people call us, you know, staying in treatment centers who have told us things like, you know, I've been clean for 3 years, and these guys are giving me a housing voucher, but I can't find a place to live because no one will rent to me. And so landlords should have flexibility in those situations and look at those people as individuals instead of just having blanket policies about background checks. So someone like that should say, you know what, I'm clean now, I've gone through treatment, I would like you to reconsider. And landlords are supposed to do that. So some things to keep in mind though with background checks, like manufacturing, sex offenses, violent crimes, I think those are going to be screened out always. So if people have those on their background, it's going to be, I'm sure most of you know, a challenge to find them housing if they have one of those charges. But if it's other charges, not those, and they've changed their life and they can't find a place to live because of that, landlords should look at them at their new situation instead of just their background check. For people with disabilities, if you all are going to be building any sort of housing, it needs to meet basic design and construction requirements. And we're not going to touch on those at all today. We can hook you up with trainings for that. You know, we do testing for this now, where we measure and make sure things are built properly. But yeah, make sure you're having those conversations with architects and designers and people, builders, if you are constructing. And then people have the right with disabilities to ask for a reasonable modification and the right to ask for a reasonable accommodation if it's going to help them to be able to, yeah, you know, live and use and enjoy the premises. And so modifications and accommodations. So modifications are physical or structural changes. And examples of modifications would be things like, grab bars in a bathroom for someone with a mobility impairment, or someone's in a wheelchair and they need the viewer on the front door lowered. Someone is deaf or hard of hearing and they ask for a doorbell or a smoke alarm with a strobe light to be installed. It's not just an audible one, okay? So those are modifications because there's something physical changing to the premises. So with modifications, we generally tell people that they should expect to pay for it once an owner approves it, okay? So private landlords don't have to pay for modifications. They will have to say, yes, you can have your modification, but they don't have to pay for it. But probably with people who are here today, if you do have some sort of housing, you've probably received direct federal funding. And if you've received direct federal funding, you would actually be obligated to pay for modifications, okay? So if you build a homeless shelter and someone asks you for a modification, you have to pay for it, okay? Or a housing project. And then accommodations are exceptions to rules or policies. So things like, I have a disability and I received my disability deposited into my account on the 7th, but your policy is that I have to pay rent on the 1st. Can I have an exception to that policy and pay you on the 7th instead of the 1st? So that's an example. Somebody who is blind, and they say, can you please email me any notices that you have for the complex because I can't read those ones that you hang on our doors, okay? So that's another example. And then exceptions to no animal or no pets situations for someone who has an assistance animal is also an example of an accommodation. And so with accommodations and modifications, the person has to have a disability. So this doesn't apply to any of the other protected classes, only disability. There has to be connection between what they're asking for and their disability, and they must need it. Reasonable means it doesn't impose an undue financial burden on the housing provider. So, if someone is living on the 2nd floor and they have a hard time with the stairs and they ask for a modification for an elevator, like that's going to be super expensive and put that housing provider probably out of business. So that's not very reasonable. So they could say no, probably, as long as they're still having a conversation that sounds something like, well, I can't put in an elevator, but there's a ground floor unit that's open. How would you like to switch floors? Okay. Or alter the nature of operations, but the determination should be case by case. Blanket policies sometimes get people into trouble. The person has to actually ask for an accommodation. The request can be made in any manner. And so if you are a housing provider and somebody verbally asks you for accommodation, that counts. We always suggest people put it in writing, but verbal requests count. And so you should take it seriously from that point. You can document it and put it in writing as well. But like I said, if somebody comes to you and asks for an accommodation, you should take it seriously at that point. The request can be made by the person or on their behalf. So I have a sister with a disability, and I have asked for accommodations with Salt Lake City, where we live, under the Fair Housing Act, on her behalf, okay? If you are a case manager or you have case managers, you or your case managers can ask for an accommodation on behalf of your client. Housing providers can ask for verification if someone needs an accommodation. If someone has an obvious disability, though, they shouldn't be made to jump through more hoops of providing that. You know, if someone is blind and they have a guide dog and it's obvious, you shouldn't make them go to the doctor now and verify that they're blind when you can see that yourself. Or someone is in a wheelchair and they ask for grab bars, like that should be obvious, okay? But most disabilities aren't obvious, and so housing providers can ask for verification, and that verification should just contain, you know, information that they have a disability, that they need it, and what the connection between those two are. I know that we're starting to get short on time. I'll mention assistance animals, and then I think I also might mention one other thing after that. Assistance animals, you might hear a lot of terms related to animals and housing. Yeah, I can make sure you all have my contact info, Travis. So assistance animals, that's the term, that's the technical term in the Fair Housing Act. It's an umbrella term that could include a number of things. It could include service animals, which are the ADA for public places, but it could also include things like, you might hear these different names, like a comfort animal, assistance animal, therapy animal, emotional support animal. Okay, those are all covered by this technical term of assistance animal in housing. So again, they're for housing situations, which for the most part should probably mean in someone's apartment. Not running free at an apartment complex, okay? So with them in their unit under their control. The type of animal is not specified. So it can be a dog, it could be a cat, it could potentially be any number of a lot of different animal types. I have up here dog, cat, snake, goat, ferret. We have had clients with all of these as assistance animals. And the animal doesn't require specialized training. What about a pony? I can absolutely give you a situation where a pony might be an assistance animal. Probably not living in someone's apartment, but here in Salt Lake or Salt Lake County, like there might be an area where you know, someone has a big plot of land, but it's zoned and it doesn't allow stuff like that. But what if they have a child that's very therapeutic for them to take care of that animal? Like they might be able to ask for an accommodation with the city to allow them to have a pony in their yard to take care of, because it's helpful to them. And that's very similar to the goat example that's up here. We had a family who had a child with autism, and it was therapeutic for them to take care of goats. West Valley City only allowed for one goat, so we helped them with an accommodation so that they could have 2 goats, because here you don't only want to have 1 goat because they're social creatures, and 1 goat will be even more destructive than they probably already are to your yard. So yeah, an accommodation for them to have 2 goats. So maybe not an elephant, maybe not an alligator, but pony maybe. Yeah, so again, like reasonable. Is it reasonable to have a pony in an apartment? I highly doubt that. But you might have an area that's zoned in a certain way that you can ask for accommodation related to the zoning. Okay, and I know that we're coming up on almost being out of time, but I do know you guys go till noon, but I'm trying to hurry. So more with animals. So as a housing provider, like I said, you can ask for verification. As a housing provider, you can't charge a pet deposit or fee. So we hear this all the time, like, yeah, you can have your animal, but you have to pay $1,000. Like that's not okay. An assistance animal is viewed as an assistance aid. So like a wheelchair or something like that for the person who has a disability. And like, you don't charge extra money for someone who's in a wheelchair, you know, so you don't charge extra money for an assistance animal. However, the housing provider can require that the animal is licensed and had its shots if state or local laws say that. They can require that the tenant clean up after the animal and be under the tenant's control. So again, just because you have an assistance animal, it doesn't mean you can let the animal do whatever it wants. Like, you have to be responsible. You have to be under the control. If there are problems with an animal's behavior, the first step in the conversation shouldn't be you need to get rid of your animal. If you're a housing provider, you should go to the lease and find where the animal's behavior is violating terms of the lease and kind of go the route of lease violations instead of first step, get rid of your animal. So having conversations is really key. Communication with people with regards to accommodations is really important. Situations where an owner just like shuts down a conversation, those usually go bad. And we usually end up filing complaints against those sorts of owners or landlords. So those are animals. I don't have a slide for this, but I do also want to mention, so most of what I've been talking about has been this idea of disparate treatment, right? So just I'm treating someone differently because they belong to a protected class. As administrators or entities, there are some other types of discrimination related to fair housing that you also need to kind of think about that I've alluded to already. One is called disparate impact. And so disparate impact means that there's a policy in place that on the surface, it looks like it's fair, okay? Or it looks like it's neutral, but it's actually affecting different groups of people differently, okay? So a policy where I say, I'm gonna run a background check on everyone, it might sound fair, but the reality of a policy like that is you're probably going to be screening out more people of color. You're probably going to be screening out more people with disabilities because they're more likely to have something on a background check than other people. So think about policies and how they might affect people. Another example of that would be you have to have a social security number. And so that would screen out refugees, that would screen out maybe students who are exchange students from other countries, okay? So if you're hard and fast on somebody has to have a social, you should think about who that's going to affect. And then the last one is the idea of, if you're receiving federal funding, you have the obligation to what's called affirmatively further fair housing. And we really didn't hear much talk about this the previous 4 years in the last administration, but it's something that we're having more conversations about again. And so thinking about going above and beyond discriminating on the individual level and above and beyond having bad policies to thinking about, like, how can we be inclusive? And taking a look at housing in our communities and making sure people have opportunity. And oh yes, so Steve just asked me if we could talk, right? So he said that Davis County is doing their analysis of impediments, and so this all relates to that. Needing to take a look at things, like, are you only putting affordable housing in one little area of your county, and concentrating that poverty and those types of opportunities in one place? You should probably be spreading that out. So thinking about things like that. So I think that's maybe all I have right now. Does anybody have more questions?
Thank you so much, Bart. I really appreciate that. I know it's a lot of information, so I'm glad we're able to keep this recorded, and we'll put it on our Balance of State website here in the next few days. So if that's cool with you, Ard.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
we could chat about that.
We'll edit it. We'll you know what I mean? It'll be fine. We won't do the rest of the meeting. But no, I really do appreciate it. And if we have questions in the future, we'll definitely be reaching out to you just to make sure that we stay up to date as a group, because we do have providers everywhere in the state. And I think everybody has a different experience with fair housing, depending on where they are and what they do. So
Yeah, how it looks here in Salt Lake is going to be way different than.
Yeah,
anywhere
for
else.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Cool. Any other questions for Vard? Vard, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. If you just want to hear what's going on in the Balance of State, but I won't hold it against you if you don't.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Very appreciated. Next, just moving along with our agenda. Travis, are you okay if I just kind of take the next couple?
Yep, you're great. Thank you.
Cool. So the Utah Homeless Network update, I think the only one we really have is that the Utah Homeless Council, for the first time ever, will be meeting next Wednesday, the 25th, and that will be at 2 p.m. in Sandy, I believe, in the Larry H. Miller office building, I think is what it's called. We can send those details out to the group though, for those of you that want to attend. I'm not sure if there'll be a virtual option. I'm pretty sure there will be, but I can't confirm or deny. Lainey, do you know for sure?
I feel like Trisha mentioned last week in the Utah Homeless Network meeting that there would be, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, keep an eye out for that. If you're not already, you should definitely go to the Utah Public Notice website and subscribe to our office so that you get those notices when they come out. We should have it posted by Friday, the agenda, and it'll have those pieces of information along with the location, everything like that. Any questions about that? Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I say the new Utah Homeless Council replacing the old State Homeless Coordinating Committee?
Yes. And
Thank
quick
you.
question, do we, is there any kind of, other than the people that sit on the council, is there any RSVP or anything you guys need to know about in terms of capacity for the room?
Not that I'm aware of. That's a really good question. Not that I'm aware of. We can definitely, if you would like to make comment at that meeting, just like any other Utah Public Notice meeting, just let us know ahead of time and we can make sure you're taken care of. But as far as I know, it should be able to accommodate everybody. We have 40 going right now that I know of, and nobody's said it's gotten full or anything. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have Mayor Randall will be there, and then a couple of
Awesome.
us are coming up from St. George. So.
Okay, I'll make sure a note, and if we have any issues, we'll have Wayne send something out or Trisha.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. We're excited for it. It should be a good meeting. And no items, I think, as far as things that this group would be too concerned about, other than if you're on the council, please come. But you're definitely welcome to join, everybody that's here or anybody in your different organizations. Cool. Next one I think I have for you, Lainey, just for state funding updates.
Yeah, we just wanted to give a quick update. I can imagine that you have already been working with your LHC representative from our office. We are working on, I believe pretty much all budgets have been approved by our fiscal departments, and we're now working with our contract analysis team to create the renewal contracts. So keep an eye out for that from communication from your lead, from a representative from our office. We are also in the process of doing monitoring for FY21 contracts. So if you have not already heard from your LHC representative from our office, keep an eye out for that as well. We definitely, we've been sending out communications via email, that kind of thing. We are in the middle of a state audit. Just so you're aware, you may be hearing from auditors. If you have any questions, feel free to contact our office. We are coordinating with them as well, but if you don't feel comfortable about something, just let us know and we can make sure that everything is being done properly on their end as well as our end. And also a heads up, we are, so the leftover money from FY21 contracts that was not spent out. So we collected all of that back from agencies, and we are planning to create a fall RFP, request for proposals, for that funding. This is for existing projects as well as brand new projects. Keep an eye out for that. We have not released the RFP yet, but we plan to by end of September, Russell.
Yeah, that would be the goal. I think we're going to ask permission in this meeting next week and then get on it from there. We just want to make sure our new council's aware of what we're doing.
Right. So a lot of things going on that are just keep an eye out for, really, is kind of what's going on for new contracts, renewal contracts, as well as the new RFP and monitoring with our agency, our office, sorry. Any questions about that? Any concerns?
We did, Shirley, just to give a really quick update, we did just learn there's up to 200 people that can be in that room. So we don't anticipate that volume. But if that changes, we'll keep you posted.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. Cool. Okay, thank you so much, Lainey. If nothing else, we'll turn it over to Catherine for update on the lived experience board.
Good afternoon, guys. Okay, so it's the first time I'm doing this, giving you guys an update. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Novick, and I'm a representative here in St. George for the formerly homeless. And a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, we had a meeting addressing what we'd like to do on this board for the formerly homeless. So I represent St. George. There's a few people throughout the state who represent different parts of it. So I think we have someone else on this meeting who's, I don't remember the area she's from. I'm sorry, but she's not from here. And so I see Stephanie, so I didn't know if she wanted to ask me something or have me continue.
Yeah, sure. We have both Catherine and Heather. Heather's from Price. And they have been willing to come today and talk to you about some of the things that we've been talking about as a formerly homeless board. We have a meeting the last Monday of every month. And so if you have formerly homeless in your area that feel like they would like to participate, that board is still open. We do pay these people for their knowledge, because they are the experts in how to end homelessness. And so they do get $20 an hour for their expertise. And I think today they were focusing last meeting on a couple of items that have been big barriers for the homeless community. And Catherine, maybe I'll let you talk about the transportation issues that you were seeing.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I've addressed in this board is that one of the bigger trials here in St. George, at least while I was homeless, was transportation, and the whole process of this board coming together so we can educate the people in our communities to let them know our biggest trials and the needs. So for instance, St. George, Utah, our summer weather, our averages are higher than 98 degrees. And so a lot of these people who are homeless, they need better transportation. And I've gone over in these meetings to let them know the details of it. So like we talk about being like trying to organize more things like that. And so for me personally, I've tried to come up with something like getting like our local college involved and trying to substitute some sort of humanitarian credit for helping with transportation with our local shelters like Switch Point or the Dove Shelter, or even people who might not even be staying in those places. And if you want me to go into further detail, I can do that as well. But that'd be something we could eventually develop that would help a lot of our homeless people in this area specifically. But because each member of the formerly homeless board represents the different trials and different needs that need to be addressed, there's for each place that's being represented, it will face different needs. And so for Heather up in, is it Price? She could talk about the things that are most troubling in her area. And so being in St. George, transportation isn't the only issue because of where we're located, but we're also dealing with, as the whole state is dealing with, an influx of people coming from all sorts of areas. And so affordable housing is a huge issue on that as well. But I think tackling and talking about transportation for these people, among all the other things that can create stability, that would be one huge jump into creating a huge progress from people who are just trying to stay in a shelter to people who are eventually making enough progress to live on their own or get out of that kind of living.
And Heather, thank you so much, Catherine. Heather, maybe a little bit about your experience with recovery and getting into housing. Maybe a little.
Yeah, so my name's Heather. I now have been in recovery for 3.5 years. Before that, I was an addict. Trying to find housing when you're an addict is really hard. Most people don't want to rent to you. One thing that we have here in Price is we have no shelter. We have nowhere to go. You're on the street. You're on the street. That's one thing that I'd really like to see change here in Price. Not only we have no places to rent, like the whole state, right? People are coming in, taking up all of our housing, but we don't even have a shelter. We don't have any place for our homeless to even go. They can't go to a soup kitchen. You know, we have an amazing food bank here. But if you don't have a place to go cook your food or even a way to transport your food home, we don't have transportation here either. You're walking or you're riding your bike if you don't have a vehicle. So those are some of the things that our county, like Carbon County, Emery County, that's some of the stuff that we really face down here is, you know, if you're homeless and it gets cold in Price. We get cold, we get snow, and there's nowhere to go. You get really hot in the summertime. That's something that I faced when I was homeless. I was homeless in the wintertime. You know, I couldn't just go to a shelter and be warm for the night and get a good night's rest. Even when I got into recovery, I've been clean for 3 years, and then trying to find a place to live when I graduated drug court, it was a little bit hard. So yes, definitely what we face in Price.
Thank you. I just want to mention one other thing that I think this board has been really incredible at is they've come up with some really good ideas. Like they did a clinic for a vaccine clinic at one of the shelters in Salt Lake, and they had humanitarian superhero group that came for the kids, to be there for the kids while the parents were encouraged to get shots, because they knew that that the kids needed to be encouraged to go there also with the parents, and that it wasn't a scary event for these kids. And then the other thing I really like is one of the things that they have all mentioned every time we get together is there are so many different services and so many different systems that they're having a hard time knowing how to get help in a certain area, how to, everything's so different across the state. So how can they help people that are currently homeless? And one of the ideas is they asked us to start a Facebook page where homeless people can get on and ask their questions. And then everyone from the homeless community real time could, answer, say, oh, well, I found help at Iron County Care and Share, or this is where I went to get a bus voucher. This is where I went to get food. And I thought that would be a really incredible resource for our state. So I encourage you to use these ladies. No, I encourage you, if you would like for them to present, or would like for them in your community to look at them as a resource in your community, and also send anybody from your community that's formerly homeless to be a part of this, because it is pretty cool. And does anyone have questions for these girls, ladies? Sorry.
I was gonna say one thing just about that Facebook page. I think just because each area has different things. I think Heather was saying that in her area they have a soup kitchen, but they don't have let's say a shelter, and I haven't left St. George. I've not really been outside of St. George in the state.
We don't
So
even have a soup kitchen. We don't
Yeah, I
even
was
have a soup kitchen. We don't have anything. Nothing. Nothing. I mean,
Oh,
we have Renee, but
that page that we have is basically speaking for different areas of Utah. It's not just for one area, it's for the entire state. So anybody who has questions about those resources, because we all represent different things, like Heather might have information about places that might help with like substance abuse. For me, my homeless situation was caused from domestic violence. So the resources I use to get through domestic violence, any counseling, any medical attention, any sort of thing, that those resources will be put on those pages, so, or that page specifically. So anybody from any angle of homelessness or who's currently going through it or about to go through it could get those resources as well. So that's accessible throughout the whole state of Utah, not just one area. That's the only thing I was going to add.
I appreciate the information, and this is exactly what we were hoping for. Actually, probably more than what we were hoping for. So it's great input, good information, and yeah, just keep the collaboration going.
What is the Facebook page called?
Now it's infancy. Oh, sorry, Catherine, go ahead. It's in its infancy though. Recognize that.
Okay.
I think it's called the Formerly Homeless Board of Utah, the state of Utah. I think that's what the title is on the page. We have a few followers and a few people on our page. We're growing. It's very, very cool to get that notification.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just adding that to my notes so I can get that out, get the word out. Thank you.
Cool, that's super exciting. Thank you guys for that update. We'll keep this. Liz, I do have Bard's email and phone number. I'll send that out before we end this meeting for sure. But I think we'll keep this as a running item and discuss as a Balance of State Board some other ways that we can introduce these ideas into our system. So I think that's awesome. Cool. Next up, we have, or any more questions for Heather or for Catherine? Cool. Next up, I asked the HMIS team here at the state, specifically Lynn Sharp, to talk a little bit about coordinated entry and how it's changed with the introduction of a different module within HMIS. And I think it'd just be good for the whole group to see and maybe have a little bit of discussion afterwards about it. So Lynn, I'll turn time to you.
Yeah, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? I have a mask and a headphones and you never know. Thank you. Let me share my screen. I was just going to start by just reminding you that this website exists. And then I'm going to ask you to put any comments or questions that you have about coordinated entry into the chat. And so I'm going to go through a couple of things first, and then once I finish up through my stuff, I'll answer those questions. So if you just want to pop them in the chat. Yeah, let's see. Also, like, this is hour 1.5 in this meeting. And I'm about to get into a fairly long training. So maybe everybody like give a good stretch, because now we're going to talk about data entry, everybody's favorite subject. Okay. So this is our website, the utahhmis.org website. I'm just going to pop this in the chat just so that you guys can find it. And all of this training material for coordinated entry is posted right here under coordinated entry. We tried to make it hard for you. So there it is. And I am going to just assume that you all are at least a little bit familiar with the process. We introduced this in October of last year. If you're not, feel free to watch this video. There have been some updates happening, like where you start the coordinated entry process. So we put some screenshots in here to show you where to start, but this video gets you through the main process. And I'm actually going to talk through these coordinated entry events, which will be used. They're imperative to making sure that HMIS itself making that coordinated entry process more functional. They're also part of those EHV vouchers that so many agencies, so many housing authorities have. And it's how an area has been really successful in implementing so far this EHV process in their community. So I'm going to jump over here if I can find it, just to the slides. And like I said, these slides are posted. They're right here. So if you want to follow along, you can. If you want to come back to it later, it's there. But I'm just going to go through these really quick. Just really quick, we've been doing, and I'm reusing these slides from another presentation that I did. We've been using coordinated entry for a while. And like I just said, the coordinated entry events really is what gives coordinated entry its flavor. Because I think that the way that it's been used, it's very similar to how we were doing it before we had this new fancy list, where we just create a list of people and you talk about it in a meeting. The coordinated entry events allow us to do some of this stuff that happens after those meetings inside of HMIS. To talk through it, let's talk through a CE event. They should be recorded for all basic interactions in the CE system. So they're used by projects to capture any access events like your diversion assessment, your housing needs assessment, that BI, the full FDAT. And then the results of those are referrals events. So like we're referring them to this permanent supportive housing project, we're referring them to this emergency shelter, and then what's the results of those referrals. So its idea is to help you understand like all the things that go into helping a person resolve their episode of homelessness, and having a way to like quantify all that work that I know you guys are doing, but it's probably happening like via email or phone calls or in the meetings. So we want you to use those CE events for all basic interactions in the CE system. And how I actually just said that, so I'm not going to reread that bullet. There you go. Where are these CE events? They've actually been in the system since we launched it last year. And so they're in a couple of places that you'll find them, and I'll show you where they are in the system in a moment. But they're in the by name list under the action item. You'll find them there. You'll see the last CE event when it appears on the by name list when you search right now. When you search that by name list, most likely most of those are pretty blank, or they're just blank. There's nothing there because they're not really being used. But as you're doing it, you'll be able to see when the most recent thing was done with them. They're not 100% set up yet, and I really held off doing training yet because I hate training users on something that isn't quite ready to go, because my concern is that somebody will try it, it won't work, and then they'll go, oh, this doesn't work, and they never do it again. And really what it is that we just need providers, so agencies like you, to tell us what services you are doing. What services are you providing? Are you providing that permanent supportive housing? Are you providing emergency shelter? Do you want to receive referrals for IDs or whatever it is? Tell us what you're providing so that we can set this up so that users can put referrals in. And this is where that frustrating piece will come in. When we're doing this for EHV vouchers, it is set up in the system. And so I can train you on how to do this now, but just know, like, if you click something else on a CE event list, you might not be able to save it. And if you want to do that, if you want to have that service in your community, email me, email our HMIS team, and we'll get it set up for you, please. We have a bet in our office on who can get the most of these. We're calling them, they're called providers in the system. How many we can get set up, because we need to have them to make this functional. Like, please help me make this functional. Okay. So we're doing it now. I said it. The reason we're starting this now is because of those EHV vouchers, even though it's not 100% ready. You guys know this, that EHV project started on July 1st. And at least in other areas, they started using the coordinated entry by name list to help prioritize those people with EHV so that they could still appear on the by name list, but they had a separate process, which I think I am not the best person to explain that to you guys, but that's how it's functioning in HMIS. I'm also assuming that you guys know what EHV vouchers are, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but if you need a review, here it is. Again, these slides are available to you. So what's the difference between a CE event and a service? Because CE events and services, they are very similar in our system, and they're actually set up almost exactly the same, but we add some extra stuff to make a CE event a CE event. The CE events will have providers associated with it. It works with referrals, and I'll talk to you guys more about that later. It is a required element for HUD's coordinated entry process, and it has some rigid requirements on like the types of services that, or the types of things that a CE event can cover. Services, they're really only linked to just any enrollment. They can be a lot more flexible. They don't necessarily work with the HUD CE requirements, even if it's a CE service that you end up saving. It doesn't quite talk to each other in the system. And most enrollments don't require services for the funding source, but coordinated entry does have this like very specific requirement. but also means that the services are a lot more flexible and used. Agencies can kind of define their services within their agency that make sense for them, unless they're required by funding. Sometimes they're required by funding. So I'm going to talk about this CEU referral to housing voucher EHV event. But just know that like once you get down this saving this event, most of the other CE for services and events that you CE events that you have will be essentially the same. It's just having that provider that's willing to do that service is what will make it functional. Let's see. Yeah. So when do you use the CE event thing? Anytime you refer a client to the EHV, you'll do a CE EHV event. With the other CE events, it would just be when that happens in the system. Who does it get recorded on? You'll just put it on the head of household. And then who provides the service. So what you're doing when you're putting in a CE event referral for emergency housing vouchers is you're saying, hey, can this housing authority provide this voucher? So it's actually the housing authority that you're referring to them that will be doing this service, which is a little bit different than most of the services that we're entering, or like all of the services that we enter other than CE events and referrals. Because when you put that in, you're either doing it or like the client is doing it, and it's this direct interaction you have with them. But in this case, you're saying, hey, these other people, they're going to do this. And then the second part of that is those other people confirming that they did this thing. You can follow up with the client. Their information will appear on the client's dashboard. It'll appear a little bit on the by name list. The housing authority, if you're the housing authority receiving these referrals, there is a report that is in the system that you can use to look at these incoming referrals. Because not all of the housing authorities are using it yet, also contacting that agency and making sure they like got that referral is a really good step right now. Also, like if you're one of those housing authorities who got the VHV vouchers on this call and you're not in HMIS, also call me, because we would love to get you set up so that you are using this and it's more functional for you too. Make your life a little bit easier. Is there any new reporting with these? There will be, hopefully very soon. We're thinking that we'll get something on October 1st for this reporting, and we'll be able to see the CE events and some of the results of that. For right now, that incoming referrals page that I'll show you guys in a moment is probably the best report that we have available to you, but we expect to have some more reporting coming down the line very soon. Okay, so let's talk about how adding it to the system. This is for you guys to watch later on. I'm just going to jump into our training database because this is a tiny video and I'm sharing this. I'm sure this is impossible to see, but it's there for you if you need it. Let's go over here. So I'm already logged into our training database. So I'm just going to put this client into a coordinated entry project to make sure that that we can actually add a referral. I'll do this really quickly. And then if you have any questions about it, like I said, go back to those slides in that training. But I'll just enroll this client into coordinated entry. Also, all referrals, all enrollments can start right here now. And I'm really excited about that. That was like months of work for us, a little thing. I'm just going to put him in Bear River coordinated entry. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put him in my sample CE project, mostly because MSO just stands for my sample organization, and I know everything's set up there. And I'll select this client. There we go. This is the universal data assessment. If you have any questions about this, obviously feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, I'm going to go really quick on this. Here, I'll do this one just so that I don't have to answer all of those questions. The eviction questions, zip code, health insurance. Then it gets into the triage assessment, which is, it was the diversion assessment and now it's triage assessment. The hope with this as you're getting to this, if you're going to this page, this is the very first day that this client is experiencing homelessness, and it's the very first contact that they have with a homeless service provider. And the nice thing about coordinated entry is that anybody in your area can enroll somebody into this project. So just the very first time somebody is touching this project, you can enroll them into coordinated entry and you can start working on housing them or just getting them off the streets for that night or whatever services they need. And so there really isn't any like limitations on who's putting this in. And that allows us, I always forget we don't need to do that. This you don't need to do, sorry, it's why it's not starred. Anyway, but yeah, it's really nice because it allows just anywhere the client is accessing the system, they can get into this. The assessment date is the day you talk to them. The information date is the day you talk to them. They should always be the same. It might not be today. I'm just going to leave it at default to today. The current living situation is where they're sleeping tonight, so maybe we're hooking up with emergency shelter tonight. If you pick something that isn't a literally homeless situation, we'll get some additional conditional logic questions, but we'll just pretend we're doing that. This will actually show up on the by name list, and you can rewrite over that. Domestic violence, yes or no questions there. If they all come back to yes, you'll get some extra questions here, and most likely that client should be referred to a domestic violence service provider that night. Here are the diversion questions. So hopefully you guys are familiar with these. I'm actually going to skip right down to the bottom of this. The last couple of things, they default for you, so most people kind of forget that they're here, or at least that was my thought when I was setting up this page. The prioritization status, this defaults to place on prioritization list. This means that you're enrolling them into coordinated entry for this by name list. And then the restriction is just share across to everybody. That's our default restriction. The way these coordinated entry projects work and these enrollments work, if client has not signed that informed consent release form, they shouldn't be enrolled in coordinated entry, because they will be shared, and if it's not shared, it kind of breaks some logic on things. So make sure that the client is already comfortable with sharing their information in the database like this. If they are not, let's approach their needs in a different way. So this is the housing needs assessment. This is just asking if you want to do a VI SPDAT. I'm just going to say no right now just to get this enrolled, but that's what it is. And you can always come back and do a VI SPDAT later. So if you're not able to do it right that moment, that's okay. And the same thing with the SPDAT. So now we have a client that's enrolled in this coordinated entry project. I'm going to come over here to coordinated entry. I'm going to load up this new by name list, and they should be the very first one on my list. But why don't I just search for my sample organization? With the balance of state, because you have both like a regular coordinated entry project and a domestic violence service provider coordinated entry project, when you're searching the by name list, make sure you use this one and just type the first letter of your first letters of your LHC in here, and that'll work. That'll search everybody all together. There's our client. And I see your question, Steph. I will respond to it when I'm done with this, just to make sure I get through this whole thing. So we have our client, they're on our by name list. We're ready to refer them to this EHE project. Now we can actually do the CE event. So I'm just going to do a CE event. We're going to click add new, and it looks like I've been playing around with this a little bit on this client. I'm going to scroll down here. The EHV emergency housing voucher event or service here is at the very bottom of this list. This is the one that has provider set up for it in the live database so that you can actually use it. This enrollment, you're going to select your enrollment, so we'll do the CE project. The location is just the project that you're referring to. So there will be several items listed here. It'll be all of them across the state that are receiving these EHV projects. Right now, it also includes other housing only projects. In the near future, it will I'm expecting it to be just the EHV projects, or there'll be some sort of differentiation. So just make sure you're picking the one for your area. It'll have the name of like your housing authority and then emergency housing voucher EHV. So it should be fairly clear. If it's not, please reach out to us. We don't want you to like guess who's getting this referral. The provider, so this is the provider giving that service. So you can see we have, in the live database, you'll also see all of the housing authorities that are doing this. You just want to make sure you're selecting the same housing authority twice. We do have the ability to customize this a little bit. So if it's confusing for you or your users, then we can create a service just for your LHC's coordinated entry, so that you're only seeing one service and then only one thing comes up here, and we can make it a little easier. But right now, you'll just see everybody that's providing these EHV vouchers right there. These last couple of things, this will actually be the housing authority as they're responding to it, or maybe you, if that housing authority isn't in there, once you know the results. When you're first saving it, you don't have to do anything with this right now. And yes, I know there are 2 restriction questions. No, I can't change it. It drives me crazy too. Just leave it as it is. So I'll hit save on that. So now this client, if I search for this now, they will have, so here's our example 39. There's their last CE event. And if we go to their dashboard, you'll see there's a referral for the CE event. And if you click on CE, over CE events, there's that referral to CE events. And you can also add one here. So if you want to do it here, rather than finding them on the by name list, It's the exact same form. Yeah. Let's see what's the next thing on my slide. So how do you add it to the system? That's how you do it from the client dashboard. If there you go, if you want to do it that way. How do you follow up with the client? So there's a couple of ways you can follow up with the client here. Basically, it's just finding that CE event, whatever you created, and clicking edit. And now you know that like they got a referral, so they got a referral and it was on this date, or they're going to get this voucher, so it's going to be on. You know, it's there, and then there's an enrollment that we created in the system as a part of that, and it's not required because maybe there won't be with these EHV projects, and that's actually kind of okay. But you would want to follow up with that. If the housing authority is participating in the system, this is what the housing authority does, or is maintaining this, and then they can put in the enrollment if they're creating that enrollment and tracking that as well. You can also do that from the by name list as well. So if I found this client here, I could go to CE events and I could find it. And it's actually the same page, but I could find it right there and I could follow up from them. So like you're sitting there in your CE meeting and you say, hey, what's happening with client 39? Oh, we did this thing. Hey, we know that this has been updated. Let's update that CE event so that we know what's happening. And maybe you can update your comments so that you can track what's actually happening. You can do that by selecting triage assessment. And then saying right here, and so now when you pull this client up, you know that, okay, they have this thing. The last thing I'll show you on here is how to follow up if you're that provider receiving a referral and why we really want the housing authorities to get into the system. So I'm going to change hats. I'm going to log in under my example organization. Here, and I'm going to be the provider running this CE project. And so when this referral was entered into the system, what happens on my side is down here under CE reports, under incoming referrals, this client is added to incoming referrals. So here it is, client 39, referred from state of Utah, which is where I was logged in before. We want them to get this EHV project. This is the person that sent that referral. Here's their email. Let's shoot them an email and say, hey, tell me about this client. You can, as a provider, you can go in to select the client. You can find the information about this client. You can also go in and follow up on this coordinated entry event, and you can give it a little bit of information. Like I got this on 8/17, and we scheduled an appointment for 8/21. I don't know, at 5. And you can come back a second time, and you can say, okay, on 8/21/21, we have a service provided, and there you go. And so on your side as that provider, you can see all of these results at any given time. If it will load for me. There you go. So you'll see all of these results. And so you'll see like this person has a service provided. You can go in and edit this and you can see that referral outcome as well. And you can export this report. So if you want to look at it in a spreadsheet, because I'm actually more comfortable with spreadsheets myself, but I'm that data nerd that does that. If you want to look at it as a spreadsheet, then this becomes a way to manipulate this. What we're doing in another COC is the housing authority. This is becoming their EHV provider list. And essentially they're doing it first come, first serve. So the last person on the list gets served first, and then they're working their way up on these referrals to get them into the EHV projects. And it's helpful for them because they're able to go to the client's file and they can see, like, here's their social security number and their date of birth, and here's all of their family information. So like, we know a lot of the information we need to get them eligible for these programs without having to ask the client for additional information, and maybe just like double checking with them before you send it in and call it that. And there's some additional tools in here that nobody's using right now, but we'd love for people to use, like address history, which would actually allow us to update clients like phone numbers and stuff. So if that is useful in your community, we can help train to that, and we can help users do that so that your housing providers know who to call when somebody has been referred over to one of their programs. So I think that's all I've got with EHV. I did a bad job tracking my time. I'm sorry. Let me look at this question. So when we choose not placed on prioritization list, posted in HMIS puts the person on CE list anyway, why? Yes, so the placed on prioritization list here, this question, you'll see this on the VI SPDAT as well. And you have to select it on the SPDAT. But really what this is this is a HUD data element that's going into this CE APR that I talked about, that reporting. They are going to show up on that by name list because they're enrolled in coordinated entry. So if you're not placing them on the by name list, then, and you're not going to work on housing them, then you would also need to exit them from coordinated entry. This is why actually on this page, I defaulted this to just placed on prioritization list. But on the VI SPDAT and the SPDAT, I don't think on the SPDAT, but on the VI SPDAT pages, I didn't want to go in and tweak those because there's so much coding that goes behind it. So you have to make that selection, and it's frustrating for me too. But that's why it's basically telling HUD, yes, we're going to work on housing these people. And if you're not, that's fine. Maybe during this diversion assessment, you figured something out. Just make sure you exit them from coordinated entry. That way you're not also thinking about housing them, even though you're not, like they weren't placed on that prioritization list. Hopefully that answers your question. Do you guys have any other questions for me? Yeah, I can go through anything else with coordinated entry. You got me. You got me, so I can also go through other things in HMIS too. So
I think this is really exciting, Lynn. If we could get it set up correctly where it's notifying people of referrals, people can see who's been referred to them, you can see the email of that person. I just think there's a lot of, and we're looking at this on a grander scale, but there's a lot of capability in HMIS that's not used, that's causing, in my perception from, not having to use HMIS every day, it's causing a lot of frustration that could be fixed.
yes.
So can we, as a group, the 31 people in this room, try this for like 6 months or some amount of time, like really commit to using these features and see if it makes our lives better.
I just want to
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Stinking excited about this because there are all of these other software programs that people are trying to get us to use, and I want it all in one place. And I know that it's going to take a while, but you guys are the bomb. Like, you just continue to listen to us and try your best to work with these developers to get this to be what we need. And so thank you so much for all of, I know sometimes it's a headache, but just bravo, like super cool. I'm just so excited. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited you're excited because that makes the learning curve a little easier. Yeah, thank you. Something that I thought of, sorry, Kristen, but I was trying to cut you off on, and I'm glad I heard this. Something to make our jobs a little bit easier, to make your jobs easier. For this provider setup, to get it so that you can actually receive referrals for what you're doing. On our homepage, we have this form, this referral provider setup. Click on this form, fill it out. The last thing on it is going to ask you to just tell me a time you want to meet with me. And that's where you're telling us what services you're going to provide. And this just gives us some basic information so that when we set up your agency with this provider thing, we know what to put in there. Like, what are your operating hours? What's the best number that a client can call? Like, things like that. Who should we email if those are questions that, like, I don't know as the HMIS admin, and I imagine would change on occasion. So we would want to have this information there. If you can get this filled out, great. If not, you can always just request a meeting with me and we can go through it that way too. And then something else I can show you, as you were talking about some of these things, to get it all in one. So I really only showed you the CE events, because CE events are so specific for coordinated entry. They're really like, they're referrals to housing projects and some emergency shelter, like they're very narrow, but there's also a referral functionality set up in here that works pretty similarly to the CE events. Like, you can even see the CEs there. But you can refer any service for a referral. So like, maybe you guys are doing, I don't know, let me see, a basic needs item, and you have a provider in your community that is that provider. I don't know if I have anything set up in here for that. Yeah, kind of a guessing game in here to see what works. We'll just pretend that's just a service, because I know I have things set up. Maybe I do. Goodness. Here. Okay. So like, you can just do referrals for any provider for anything. If it's not a CE referral, so specifically for housing, you could still refer them for whatever you need to refer them to. Like, maybe this agency is the one that's doing food boxes. let's get referrals in so that when they walk into that agency with the food box, like a need for a food box, they don't have to fill out these questions again. They can just get their food box. So like, I'm just gonna save this. And this is where emails come into place when we're doing referrals. And I can give you guys more training on this if this is something that you want to tap into, because this is where a referral will come in. And an email, this is just a baseline email saying, hey, check coordinated entry, you have a referral. And then what will happen, and I'm going to pull this over here to make sure I'm not sharing anything embarrassing. What will happen is you'll get an email, or whoever has set it up, oops, will get an email saying, hey, you have a referral in the system so that you have something that you can check. That doesn't work with CE events. It does work with referrals that aren't CE events. So it's a little nutty, but it works. And it's something that can make your lives a little bit easier too. Okay. Any other questions or anything else? I'll jump into I got a couple of private chats. So, oh, it looks like, let's see. Oh, sorry. Some of them are private, some of them aren't. Anna, yes, please, let's get your agency as a provider. Let's talk about that. Shoot me an email. Let's see, how is this set up to coordinate with United use closed loop system? I have no idea, Clint. I'd love to talk to you about that too. Until just this moment, I didn't know what Unite Yes Us is. Cool.
Okay.
Well, that's all I got.
We have 6 minutes left. Lynn, thank you so much. This is something that the more we use it, the better it'll get. And please communicate what your needs are, and we'll keep doing what we can. Thank you, Lynn. Okay. Travis, we just have the 3 last items, and then I just got something from Trisha that she would like me to share. Is there anything else before we kind of wrap up with those 3 things?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, if we can just go through those.
Cool.
Great.
Homeless Summit, again, reminder, November 4th and 5th. Please come. We would love to see everybody there. I will be sending out, hopefully today, our updated policies and procedures for full membership input. We've already received it from the board and gotten that kind of cleaned up where we want it. So we just want to hear from everybody else before it's official. So I'll send those out. And like I said, hopefully today. And then the last one is just a reminder, if anybody has any trainings or anything they want to see in these meetings, please let us know. Lainey and myself and Travis and anybody on the Balance of State Board or Executive Committee would love to hear from you guys. The last thing is we just got this link. It's for agencies that want to receive funding through ARPA. Please check that out. I know we don't have a ton of time to go into it, but it's a match grant for COVID-19 related activities. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing could go to that. If you meet any of these, if you're a local government or if you know your local government and can convince them to apply for it, we would love to share that with you guys so that you're aware of it. I know we're always looking for capacity building funding, and I think this is a really exciting one that just barely came out. So I just wanted to share that with everybody so you can go share it with the people that are in your communities. Cool. And this will be recorded and posted on our website as soon as we can. And we'll send out that link when we have it. Turn the time back over to you, Travis.
Well, that was a lot of great information today. Got through a lot of material. Appreciate everyone's input. That always helps when, we have the questions and the, the interaction. It just kind of makes it a little more informative for everyone, I believe. And so, yeah, I appreciate everybody joining and hope you have a great rest of your week. And thanks to Russell, the rest of the staff there at the state, and also the executive board for putting this all together. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your week.